I'm overcome with emotion being here in this chair. Normally I can handle this, but when I see who's in front of me in this particular episode of Witness, I say, mein Gott, oh mamma mia, Stephen Colbert is with us here on Witness. So thank you for making
Watch your
time
language,
for us.
Father. This is a family show.
Now, which Stephen Colbert is sitting in the chair here? Is this Stephen Colbert of the Colbert Report, or is this a new Stephen Colbert? Are you born again?
Well, wow, that's ambitious. That's a good question, because when people invite me to do things, I don't always know who they've invited, me or the guy on the television show.
So who are you?
This is me. This is me.
So this is like the presentation of Stephen Colbert to the world.
Yes.
New Stephen, born again Stephen.
Yes, I mean certainly out of his cocoon. I changed my Twitter handle from Stephen Colbert, like host of the Colbert Report, to Stephen Colbert Pollywog, because after the last show was over, I felt like I went back to a tadpole form, and I wanted to. I wanted to like lose my arms and legs and grow a tail and have a fleshy sack around me filled with amniotic fluid, because I really do need to lose old habits from the old show to the new show. So yeah, born again. That sounds
Now,
great, Father.
Before we bury you, I am intrigued to look at that previous character, because it's a character obviously that's captivated the imagination of the world.
What do you want to know about him, Father?
I
Who's
wanna know-
asking and why?
I'm
okay.
asking- this is
Just
for-
because you got the dog collar on doesn't mean you know more about the Catholic Church than I do. Do you understand me? Are we clear on that?
I learned a couple
Okay.
weeks ago, you know a hell of a lot about the Catholic Church.
I know one or two things. I'm not going to say I'm a Basilian. You're a Basilian, right?
Bazillion, yeah.
Saint Basil?
We're many, bazillions.
Okay. Saint Basil?
Saint Basil.
I'm no fan. Okay.
Why?
Saint Arugula. That's the saint.
Saint Arugula.
That's the saint I worship. Okay.
And
delicious.
Saint Arugula.
With a little Saint Pine Nut, little Saint Reggiano.
Saint Grappa
Delicious.
is with him too, yeah.
Saint Grappa, I have worshipped. I have worshipped at the porcelain throne of Saint Grappa.
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
Now tell me something. Why is it my whole staff at Salt and Light Television, when
Yeah.
they knew I was going to be doing this interview, they went wild. They no, they said, Father, this is bigger than anything you've ever done. This is bigger than 3 popes together. So I asked him, I said, what the heck's big about this? I watched some of those programs. I mean, it's an incredible program that he did, 9 years of the Colbert Report. Who was that character? What created that character?
That character was, first of all, can I go back? You just said bigger than 3 popes. You can't be bigger than 3 popes. You can only be bigger than 2 popes. That's the most we've ever had at one time. Oh, except during Avignon, I guess. There were 3 popes at one point, right?
That's right. What do you think? I know my history.
Okay, I apologize. Forgive me, Father, for I doubted you. Thank you very much. That guy was, we like to describe him as, he was a pundit, first of all. And pundits are creatures of pure opinion, not necessarily fact, but feelings. What they feel is true. And we like to describe him as a well-intentioned, which was really important to me, well-intentioned, poorly informed, not a very curious person, high status, in other words, he assumed the high ground in every argument, idiot. And the idiot is kind of the hardest part of it, because it sounds pejorative to say idiot, but idiocy is actually, or foolishness is another way to say it, a fool is really a hard thing to consistently achieve as a performer. Like when we're rewriting any show, whether it was my old show or any show I've worked on, as a comedian, you'll be sitting around trying to think of the right joke, and someone will say, well, I have an idea. And they go, well, what is it? Because you're on deadline. The clock is ticking. And the person will go, oh, I don't know, it's stupid. And we go, how stupid? Maybe, because stupid is like gold. Because to think illogically is to think illogically is often just to think unexpectedly, and we perceive it as stupid, but that, it's boring to talk about what makes something funny, but that change up between your expectation and what somebody actually, the way someone behaves in a joke or in a scene is often where the comedy happens or where the satire happens. And so he's a fool because he doesn't act according to logic, and he also doesn't act according to social norms, and he doesn't act according to social expectations or expectations of what a human reaction would be. It's funny to talk about this with a priest, because when I would have people on the show who were men of the cloth of any faith, or people who I knew were of at least a deep or an overt faith, if that was part of their public persona that we knew about them, I would often go back to talk to them, and instead of saying, you know, he's a well-intentioned, poorly informed, high-status idiot, I would say he's a fool. And though Christ says, call no man fool, I am one. And so...
Aren't we all fools for Christ? Huh?
Yeah. Willing to be wrong in society, or wrong according to our time, but right according to our conscience, which is guided by the Holy Spirit.
Now, how long
Are you writing this down, by the way? Because I'm laying it. This is...
We're recording.
I mean, I should have this in Latin, what I just said.
I'm sending all this to Rome right away, so don't worry.
Please.
Tell me something. For each of those episodes, and I watched several of them.
All 1,447, I hope.
Several. How long did it take to prepare one episode? Like, how many people are working with you to produce that character and that episode?
Let's see. Some shows we wrote in a day, and that was very hard to do, because to do a half-hour show, creating it in a single day would be really hard. There are, including crew, all in, about 90 people who worked on the last show. On the next show I'm working on, there's going to be nearly 200 people.
For the Late Show.
For the Late Show on CBS. There are going to be nearly 200 people. A dozen writers, another handful, 4 or 5 people who are producers and also writers. In other words, they're part of an editorial staff that is cutting, collating, punching up scripts, polishing them, getting them into that final form so that I can say them. I'm one of those people. I have producers who are in our, say, our booking department, in our guest department, who work with me as to what sort of people I would want to talk to. Emily Lazar, who is my co-executive producer I've worked with for years, she knows the kind of people who interest me. Hopefully people who represent something or an idea, aren't merely famous. And we have a production department that is actually doing the nuts and bolts, literally paying the bills, hiring the caterers, feeding everybody, keeping the lights on, making sure it gets broadcast. We have the crew shooting the camera. You have the people in the control, we have the cameramen shooting the show. You got people in the control room doing the sound, sequencing all the graphics, all the video. You've got a graphics department creating what you see over my shoulder, or the graphics lower screen, or the editors creating the roll-in films that we do on the show.
I envy. I covet my neighbor here.
Yeah, but it's you know, it's a whole lot of people hopefully pulling on the same rope, and the really nice thing about it, doing it every day, is that you do your best to get it right, but you know, it's like Kleenex. There's another one in the box, and you'll get it tomorrow.
What I found interesting, there's even a play on words of the show. Now, as a teacher of French, I would say, c'est le rapport de Monsieur Colbert.
Mais oui.
And you called it the Colbert Report.
Rapport.
It wasn't the Colbert Report, but a rapport. And what was behind all that?
Well, first of all, we thought it would sound more pretentious.
So you can play.
Well, my character is high status, remember? My character that I played at the old show was really high status, and so we thought, what would be more pretentious than to have a pretentious name like Colbert, where you don't pronounce the T, like, especially to an American ear. I don't know about a Canadian ear, but to an American ear, anything that sounds French is a little, you know, is a little snooty, a little frou-frou, and so. And I'm Colbert. I was born Colbert. My father's a Colbert. My brothers and sisters are Colbert. I'm one of 11 kids, and half of us are Colbert, and half of us are Colbert, because my father says you can choose what you want. So I chose Colbert because I'm essentially a pretentious person. And so we thought, well, how can we increase that pretentiousness? And he goes, well, let's make the word after me, reports, just say rapport, and, you know, and Bob's your uncle. That's how we got the name of the show. But it's also as a play on words, because as a pundit, you know, the people I was modeling myself on, their relationship to their audience is sort of like, you know, you watch my show, therefore, you know, you're the heroes. You get what's going on in the world because I'm telling you what's going on in the world. And, you know, together we're going to fix things. And that attitude of like, we're the it-getters, that sense of rapport was just another play on words on the title of the show. Not a great play on words.
How difficult was it over a period of 9 years to maintain that character, to stay in character?
Oh, most difficult actually when I was talking to guests whose subjects I was really interested in, because he's willfully ignorant. He's not just ignorant, he's willfully ignorant, because he knows that willful ignorance allows you to win arguments you otherwise wouldn't, because you can be selective about your own facts and still be honest with yourself. If I choose not to learn what things are like in reality, I can say trickle-down economics works, because it feels like it would, right? You know, if just fill my bucket enough, eventually it's going to dribble on you. You're welcome. You're welcome for that dribble. There's more to come. But it would help if I don't actually find out what life is like for the poor. It would help if I don't find out what the history of trickle-down economics is. And that willful ignorance allows me to win that argument honestly, because I just don't know otherwise. He's not malicious. He was well-intentioned. And it was hardest to maintain that sense of ignorance, or to maintain that foolish behavior in the face of people whose subject I really enjoyed, like my friend Neil deGrasse Tyson, Father Jim Martin. Because if I really liked their subject, it would be hard to maintain my game of embodying common ignorances, because I wanted to engage them on their subject in an honest and passionate way. But that wasn't my job. My job was actually to really allow them to dispel common ignorances about their subject by standing them up for my guests so they could knock them down. And the only time that I was frustrated by that really is when my guests wouldn't realize I was doing it and they would let me win. I didn't want to win. I wanted my guests to win, but sometimes I guess the force of the personality of the character I was playing would steamroll them. So no, I'm sorry, it's over now.
Folks, the 2016 presidential election is almost upon us, and I, for one, cannot wait to see who the American people elect next for John Boehner to sue. Of course, former First Lady, former Senator, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is the current front runner, which is surprising since it sounds like she can't hold down a job.
You had a great political satire that was going on, your commentary on politics, your commentary on the American government, on politicians. Are there limits to political satire? Are there limits to...
yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on what you mean what the goal of political satire is.
Well, what is the goal? In your mind, what was the goal of political satire?
To make people laugh. You know, I would make jokes about politics because my model was the news. And I care about politics, and I care about current events, and I'll always do jokes about that. I mean, the new show has that as well. We're definitely, that's a big part of the new show, especially going into a presidential election. But the goal is to make people laugh. I mean, politics is incredibly frustrating. The news can be incredibly depressing. If we just make your day a little bit better, you know, at the end, because we make jokes that shows, yeah, we feel the same way you do, or rather, we curate for you our feelings about the news, and maybe you agree with our jokes or what's funny about the day's news. That sense of connection between the performer and the audience is the entire intention. You know, what does anybody want? Not to be alone. And I think a performer gets on stage and says the things that are in his mind in his own particular way to make a connection with an audience so he doesn't feel so alone. And hopefully the audience feels the same way. You know, it's not conscious. It's not conscious. It's here. It's not here. And so that's got to be the goal. That connection has got to be the goal, and the making somebody laugh has got to be the goal. You can't think that your satire is going to change things. Peter Cook famously said, a great satirist, worked with Dudley Moore, in Beyond the Fringe. He famously said that the greatest satire of the 20th century was the Weimar Cabaret, and boy, they just stopped Hitler in their tracks. Yeah. You can't imagine that, however great your joke is, that it's going to change things. What it does is just make a connection with an audience who's feeling the same way you do.
You had a great way of talking about religion as well, about you're Catholic, everybody knows you're Catholic, you were able to make fun of the Catholic Church. I mean, I watched some of those episodes and just burst out laughing, and you got away with it.
I'm so glad.
And, you know, at times I heard you say some comments about...
I would sometimes scoot around my priest at the end of Mass. I was kind of like,
Hi, Father.
hi, Father, I just leave. They're very nice about it.
You had a way of doing it where you didn't cross a line, but you made us laugh at ourselves and not to take ourselves too
Well, that'd be nice.
seriously.
I hope so. I mean, I hope so. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to make, I don't ever, I mean, I'll still make jokes about the church, make jokes about anything. As long as you're not being malicious, I don't think you can leave anything off the table. I wouldn't want to make jokes. It wouldn't feel right for me, or it wouldn't feel good for me. It wouldn't be obeying my own conscience, I suppose, to make jokes about the sacraments, or specifically the Eucharist. I mean, the other sacraments, for some reason, don't feel, well, they're not Christ himself, but so like a nacho cheese Eucharist joke,
Wouldn't
you know, like, you know,
Yeah.
there's plenty in that realm, but I don't want to do that
church
joke.
that Sunday.
Exactly. But I mean, the church is an important part of my life. I would be crazy if I didn't make jokes about it.
Yeah.
But one thing my character had and I had in common is that we both are Catholics, and he just feels like a victim about it all the time.
And you wore it on your sleeve. You were happy to do so.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah.
What did you think as a major figure in television?
Yeah.
When
The
early,
major figure in television.
I forgot the
exactly.
article.
Wrong. Yeah.
When you saw the terrible things happen in Paris with Charlie Hebdo.
Oh my
and
God!
You saw a group. What was going on inside of you? Because in a sense, you were able to show us that if we love our religion, we're able to laugh at it. And then we saw the tragedy happen in Paris, and Je suis Charlie and everything else. What did you think?
Well, first of all, I was shocked and horrified that this would happen to people for any public expression, regardless of how anyone might be offended by it, was shocking and horrific, and really struck dumb. There's no sufficient response I could have thought of at that moment, and I felt very lucky not to be on air at that time to have to. Often when a big story happens, I would think, I wish I were on air to talk about this. That one I was like, I'm so glad I'm not, because I don't have anything, I think, that approaches it. And because also, you know, finding humor in the tragedy of horror of others is, you know, not my job. Matter of fact, it's actually part of my job to have the discretion not to do that, to know when not to do that. So that was my first reaction. It was kind of a selfish one, which is I'm so glad I don't have to be on air right now. But the second reaction was, you know, if this were the 14th century, Christians could have done this. If the 15th century, Christians might have been offended to the point of violence at blasphemy. You know, check your history books. So in an ultimate sense, I don't perceive that action as indicative of Islam. But, so I'm not trying to make a moral equivalency between the Christianity of the Middle Ages and these people who are doing this horror right now. But every religion has been so defensive of its beliefs that it has actually abandoned its beliefs at times. And that I could do my show and make jokes about the church and now sit with a priest and laugh about it, that's a fairly modern behavior.
It's a form
That's
of
not 100-year-old. That's not a 100-year-old behavior. This is a modern behavior. This is, I hope, the right relationship to have with your faith, which is to love it, but not to exclude it from your intellect.
It's also a form of maturity too in faith.
I hope so.
People who believe can be mature enough that you love something so much that you're able to also make light of some things.
Carl Sagan once said that Buddhists believe their God is so great that he need not actually exist, which I think is a really, I really like that, because it reminds me of St. Anselm of Canterbury's ontological argument for the existence of God, about, the fool says in his heart that there is no God, but by God he means that being than which no greater being can be conceived. And then it goes into this lovely 13-step proof that God must exist because we conceive of the Word. It's logically perfect. It's completely unsatisfying. Faith ultimately can't be argued. Faith has to be felt. And hopefully you can still feel your faith fully and let your mind have a logical life of its own, and they do not defy each other but complement each other, because logic itself, I don't think, for me, and Aquinas might say differently, logic itself will not lead me to God, but my love of the world and my gratitude toward it will. And so hopefully I can use my mind to make my jokes and not deny my love for God at the same time.
Let me ask you a question. The founder of your church and the founder of my church, this Palestinian Jew of the first century named Jesus.
Yeah?
When I teach scripture, I know a lot about Jesus and what he's done, but one thing I don't find in the New Testament is that Jesus laughed.
No,
He
it
told
did
jokes.
say Jesus wept. That's tough for a comedian.
the shortest line.
Nowhere does it say that Jesus,
He laughed.
guffawed.
Yeah. He sat around. I can't imagine him sitting around the Sea of Galilee with fish
No.
and some drinks with a bunch of this motley crew. And
But he
saying,
had to, right?
Yeah, how can he not?
He's fully man, right? Fully
Yeah.
God, fully man.
But it doesn't say that he laughed or smiled.
No,
do you believe that?
but wait a second. No, nowhere does it say Jesus busted a gut. Judas. It does say Judas busted a gut.
certainly did.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's where I think Jesus had to have been laughing,
Where?
or at least smiling.
Where?
Is were they off of Capernaum or something? It's like, because it's Peter. Capernaum's Peter's hometown, right?
Yeah.
So it's Sea of Galilee. There's a storm. The fishermen are out there. Peter, his brother's Andrew, is that what it is?
Yeah.
And he's out there with the other apostles or just other fishermen. Storm, they don't know what to do, and they see Jesus walking across the water toward them, calming the waves around him as he goes. And Peter, he does his best, and he takes a risk. He goes, well, if I believe, I can do that too. So he throws a leg over, goes to walk across the water, and he does it for a little bit. But then he looks down, loses faith, and drops. And I have to imagine that looked like Wile E. Coyote running too far off a cliff, and then going about 40 feet out from the cliff, and then going, what? And falling down into the canyon.
Yeah.
If Jesus didn't laugh then I'm in big trouble.
one
Because that's
of
the
my-
God I worship.
One of the scenes, because I look at this.
Because when he goes over and he says, oh, basically, I'm paraphrasing. Can I paraphrase?
You're
It's
allowed
the 21st century.
you're
No one's
only-
going to burn
you're allowed
me.
to with me.
I'm going to paraphrase the gospel right now,
Yeah.
mistranslating it. Basically, he says, why'd you look down? Oh, you of little faith.
Yeah.
Just keep your eyes on me.
Yeah.
Because while he had his eyes on Christ, all things were possible. But when he looked at the actual trouble, he fell.
Another time I think he laughed, because I've had to go through the New Testament. People have said he never smiled, he didn't laugh, don't make him into that. When he got to Jericho, he's walking along the big crowd, and there's this guy climbing up a tree, hanging out of a tree. Can you imagine Jesus standing at the bottom of that tree saying, Zacchaeus, what in God's name are you doing? Get down here. I'm coming to your house for a blast tonight, And they said, no, he didn't laugh. He was reprimanding him. I said, Jesus laughed. He smiled. Humor is a really important thing.
Sure.
Now,
Sure.
we've talked before about humor, and I want you to tell me a little bit, what's your understanding of humor? Why is humor important for the human condition? We got a lot of people walking around the world today saying the world is bad, the church is bad, everything is bad, we're going to hell in a handbasket. What's your role in humor?
Well, on one level, humor is a release valve of tension. The world doesn't make sense to us sometimes, and the incongruity in jokes actually is like a release. You reproduce the incongruity you see in the life that you wish was happening but isn't, and you create that incongruity in a joke, and the parallel feeling of those two makes you laugh. Boy, that was a hilarious explanation of humor. But I think the most important thing is it's a communication tool, is to communicate to somebody else about incongruities of life. And C.S. Lewis, whose apologetics I really enjoyed reading when I was younger, especially. He has, in the Screw Tape Letters, he talks about on humor. And he says that there are 4 different types of humor. And one is, or 4 things that produce laughter. And it's one devil advising another devil. That's the premise of the Screw Tape Letters for those who haven't read them out there. They're really great. And Screw Tape is writing to his nephew Wormwood, who is a demon in training, about how to get the clients, which is us, to their infernal father and away from the clutches of the enemy, who is God. And so he says, now listen, I understand your patient, the client, is laughing a lot. This won't necessarily help us, you see. We think that this will help us, but there are many things that produce laughter. One is joy. And he goes, joy might be the laughter produced by old friends or family who haven't seen each other in a long time. This is related to play. These things are a music that we can't hear, but is played by the enemy that brings joy to these people's lives. The second one is play. That's the second one, play. Like the laughter that's produced by doing something in common together and perhaps doing it well, or a game of some kind. The third one is the joke proper, which is of course the one that concerns me as a humorist. The joke proper can be about things that are virtuous, but the joke proper itself is not necessarily a sin, because even making a joke about virtue takes intellectual sweat, which is itself a gift from God that people are using. The thing that produces humor, or the thing that produces laughter that will help the devil, is flippancy. And in flippancy, no joke is actually made. The attitude that a joke has been made is copped by everybody there. It does not increase affection. It distances people. It armors the soul against joy. And it deadens the intellect. This is how we will.
This is a philosophy course. This is great.
Well, it's a great article, and if someone is interested in religion or Christian life and interested in humor at the same time, read that essay, because it's a great guidepost. It's very easy to pretend like you're making a joke with people who also want to pretend they're making jokes, and if you're flippant, it is the opposite of joy, and you know, here's a reason, here's a purpose of humor, or of laughter really, because humor is a little soft term. I've said this before, but you can't laugh and be afraid at the same time. And I don't mean that like mentally you can't hold both things. It's somehow like autonomic. It's somehow physical. I think it's one of the reasons why we laugh when we're afraid. Our body's trying to get rid of that feeling inside of us. But if you're laughing, you know, you just won't be afraid, which is why it's so important to laugh at the devil. You know, I forgot who said it. It might have been Milton, who says you must laugh at the devil because the mockery alone he cannot abide.
You know, I always say that several years ago, a certain president of the United States went to Iraq looking for the weapons of mass destruction and didn't find them. We have the gift of mass construction. It's called joy. It's a dangerous weapon. And sometimes against the most horrific things that have happened in our lives in the world, the best thing that can happen sometimes is laughter and a smile and joy.
Joy is super important. We, at the old show, and hopefully the new show, you know, we're just starting up. We used to call it the joy machine, because especially when it was really hard, like on those days that, you know, doing a show all year round, because we do 200 shows a year, and it's really hard to do that, but you don't want to bank down your ambition, so you'll do a really hard show in a really hard schedule, and somehow when it was hardest, it would often feel the most joyful, or often does feel the most joyful. And And that's when I would sort of jokingly call it the joy machine. But it's sort of true, because the only way to approach something that's really hard, it's got to be with joy, because if you don't approach it with joy, it's just a machine, and it'll grind you up. And the lesson that I took from that is that doing something joyfully doesn't make it any easier. It only makes it better. And it makes it communal, that we're all doing it together. When you work in fear, or when you work in distress, you often feel alone. But jokes, laughter, humor, joy, whatever you want to call it, it connects people. And as I said earlier, what do we want to be? Not alone.
Speaking of the joy machine, we got this guy running our church right now, Pope Francis.
I'm familiar.
You've seen him. You kind of some of the pictures and stuff.
Sure,
you know?
sure. I get Us magazine.
He writes his he writes his first apostolic letter called Evangelii Gaudium.
Sure, I took my Latin.
It's not, it doesn't mean a pasta
The message of joy.
The gospel of joy, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about Pope Francis? Where does his? I think he's pretty joyful. Where do you think it comes from?
Oh, I don't know. I don't presume to know exactly, but I.
What do you think?
I assume that it is a gift of the Holy Spirit. My favorite, and I've said this to your friend, Jim Martin, is that my favorite passage from the gospel is, "So I say to you, do not worry, for who among you by worrying could change a hair on his head or add a cubit to the span of his life," that sort of thing. The opposite of worry is joy. The opposite of fear or anger is peace. The opposite of fear would be laughter. So I assume that he takes the gospel to heart and does not worry. When people are angry, I think mostly they're afraid. And if you take that particular passage, which is my favorite, it's from the sermon, when you can't go wrong in the sermon, it's all hits. It's like the Beatles. It's the Beatles of the Bible.
Like.
Yeah, exactly. Just check everybody. Yeah, swipe. Which one's Tinder? Swipe right. So I swipe right on all that stuff. So if you take that line of the gospel to heart, and it's hard, it's hard, then I think you've got a much better chance of living in joy, because you live in acceptance. You're not afraid of what's going to happen to you. And what I like about it is that Christ doesn't say, try not to worry. He says, do not worry. So I say to you, comma, or colon, however they would do it in Aramaic. I do not worry. It's close to a commandment. Yeah. And given such hope by this Pope Hope, because that's the church that I want. When he said in his, I think it was the first sermon that he gave after being made Pope in the papal audience room, where he said, I want this to be a poor church for the poor.
Una chiesa dei poveri. I want a church for the poor, church of the poor.
Now you're just bragging that you can speak Italian.
I was there.
Me italiano è molto capito, ma voglio parlare meglio. Bravo?
Bravissimo. I don't have to translate this part into Italian.
Mille grazie. Okay. Mille grazie, padre. That made me so excited. I think, one of the reasons why, and listen, I'm a wealthy man, don't get me wrong, but one of the reasons why we don't help the poor, I think, is we're afraid that if we give it to them, we won't have anything. Yeah. So again, it's fear that keeps you from experiencing the joy of helping other people. So I really like this Pope. I like this Pope because it seems like, I believe the church has always had a message of love. It's not like I'm somebody like, the church is different now. I love my church, It's not like I don't share.
You love it. You're in church, you teach CCD.
Listen, let's not go overboard with that stuff. I go to church, I do go to church, and I have taught CCD, I taught 3 years of it over the last 9 years, not every year. But I'm no particular exemplar of my faith. I just happen to have affection for my church, and I love the opportunity the traditions of my church give me to contemplate the message of Christ. That's a complicated way of saying it, but that's the action of the Mass itself I enjoy, because I love the recapitulation of the Last Supper. I really like it. It actually makes the idea of the Eucharist, the physical action of it makes the Eucharist real for me. Though I got to tell you, I don't know, take this with some salt and light.
Oh, thank you.
Is that one of the
It's in
times
the
when I
sermon
felt the
too.
Eucharist was most real to me was a time I didn't receive it. Is that I was actually at an Anglican church.
Yeah.
And, no offense. I was in an Anglican church, and a female priest was saying the Mass. And it was a high Anglican Mass, and so the words were almost exactly the post-Vatican II liturgy of the Catholic Church. And when I heard a woman say, "This is my body," it made the freshness of hearing a woman say that gave the message a universality that it always should have. And I'm not saying it doesn't coming out of a male priest, but it opened my ears to the possibility that it is also my body. That in my participation in the Eucharist, I participate in the gift that Christ gives me in a different way, because I am not a priest, and the priest is up there doing his thing. You know what I mean? He's the big boss up there and leading us and sharing this experience with them. But there is a hierarchical feeling. To hear a woman say it, who I do not perceive of as a priest, do you understand? Mm-hmm. It also invited me to perceive everyone who isn't a priest as engaging in the sacrament in an active way, mm-hmm. and opened my eyes to the message of that moment of both the gospel and the Mass in a way that I hadn't before. And now I invite everyone to attack me for suggesting that women should be priests.
We will. There'll be your address will be placed at the end of this interview. They
Please
can write
do.
directly to you.
Please.
I got a last question for you. I want to create.
Really? That's it? I really killed the interview with that one.
wanna-
Last question.
I'm
Let's get this guy out of here.
I'm saving
Get him out of here.
I'm saving the best for last. This is going to be a long question. Now let's create a scenario. The scenario is
Okay, let's improv.
Monday morning, CBS building, late night show headquarters. 90 people around your team of writers and everybody else.
More than that there, yeah.
And
Yeah.
your three principal people, these three wonderful women I've been dealing with to get you here.
Yes.
They come up with the idea and say, Monsieur Colbert, or whatever they call you there.
They do
Stephen,
call me Monsieur Colbert.
Monsieur Colbert.
Yes.
We want you to bring Pope Francis onto this show. Let's create an interview. What would you ask Pope Francis if he were sitting next to you on this brand new set that you just built at CBS for the Late Show?
I would ask him one of the questions you asked me, which is, how do you achieve joy? Because it is joy and love. Joy, I think, is the expression of the love of the moment that you're in right now, and the love of the person that you're with right now. And I would ask him about how love leads him to joy, or does love lead him to joy? E. Cummings said, "Love is the every only God who breathed this world so glad and big." He also said that who pays any attention to the syntax of things will never wholly kiss you. Wholly to be a fool, my blood approves. And so I would ask him about being a fool for Christ, because many of the things that the Pope has said have been seen as, I think probably in some ways by people outside of the church, though I don't know what the reaction is. I'm not a member of the Curia, as like sort of bomb throwing, but because the syntax, the dogma of the church is often perceived of as the syntax of things, as opposed to be holy, to be a fool, my blood approves. To be a fool for Christ is to love, because we are here to dig our brief moment in time. And I would ask him how he puts that first, because how do you get to where you are in the church and not to be consumed by the law as opposed to the love that led to the law?
What do you think? What do you think he would answer you? You've been watching him now for a couple of years and listening to him and watching the crowd response. What do you think's underneath all of that? What keeps him from being buried under something or being burdened by this wonderful tradition of ours?
I don't know. I mean, I mean it when I said a gift of the Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean something that you don't have to work for, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think you have to make a choice to perceive Christ in the people around you and to love them without fear that anything will be taken from you in the gift that you give them of your own love. the message of ultimate sacrifice that Christ shows us on the cross. He likes people. There's a simple way.
It helps.
He likes people. He's grateful for his existence.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people end up being bitter about their own existence, but to be grateful even in the face of tragedy, or to find a great gift in bringing comfort to others, also can, I think, lead you to joy. But those are all presumptuous answers. I don't know.
What are some of your favorite moments? Do you have one iconic moment or one favorite moment of Pope Francis?
I like it when he spends time with developmentally disabled people in St. Peter's Square. To take the moment to give them dignity of his attention and respect is also very moving to me. Washing the feet of a Muslim woman on his first Good Friday was a very
Holy
moving
Thursday.
moment. I'm sorry, Holy Thursday.
I got you. It's the only thing I could get you on.
No, come on, that was a little hostile, Padre. Let's do this with love, please. Think of Francis. I don't know. I like that he's laughing and smiling a lot. You know, that's not a moment. That's an ongoing thing. When I was younger, I heard Mother Teresa talk about, and I've said this to Jim Martin too. Mother Teresa talk about, you know, start your day, smile and say yes. Smile and say yes. And I see that smile on his face, and it's inspirational. And the church is a flawed and human institution for whom I always have hope. And I have no doubt that he's far from a perfect man, but he gives me hope that the message of joy that he wants to spread right now can be seen as not revolutionary, but a manifestation of something that was always there.
I agree. I agree. Stephen Colbert, I can't thank you enough. This was an incredible insight, the presentation of the new Stephen, the born-again Stephen. And I think I'm mourn the loss of that previous guy, but also I think the world is going to see a new Stephen, and I think a little bit of that previous guy might be there too.
Oh yeah, I am a hopefully well-intentioned, poorly informed, high-status idiot. I'm not that far away from him.
Welcome to the club.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining
Thanks, Father.
us.
I have so many memories, mostly shapes and colors. There's a fair amount of drinking along the way. And as I leave you for the last time, I'd like to share what I've learned with future generations, as well as the aliens from Zafrax 5, who find this show on the golden cylinders launched into space moments before the Earth explodes. Hi, guys. But you know what I'll always remember? The hard-working men and women of broadcast news who told us who won that governor's race. Men and women like Stephen Colbert. You see, folks, tonight marks a sort of farewell for me, but who knows, someday maybe you'll see me on TV again and you'll nudge your spouse and say, hey, I remember that guy. I used to love him. Maybe I will buy his slap chop. So, that's it for the rapport. I'll simply end by saying it has been a pleasure and a privilege to be welcomed into your homes these last 9 years. So to you and yours, I say a fond, what's that? I have another month and a half of shows. Well, then this was a little too dramatic. I'm sorry, we'll see you tomorrow. I'm embarrassed. Wow.